The government's controversial new benefit system is in crisis.
You don't really have a lot to live on. It works out less than £30 a month. If there wasn't places like this, you'd be in trouble.
Families left penniless have been driven to despair.
I'd sell things around the house just to make money so I could put money back in the electric.
Tenants under pressure aren't paying their rent, and some face eviction.
I've had enough. Honest to God, I've had enough.
One of the first councils to experience universal credit has opened its doors to our cameras.
Are you still in a homeless situation now?
Vulnerable people struggling to cope now face an uncertain future.
It's not going to end well, I don't think, this.
Tonight on Panorama, how a benefit system designed to encourage people into work is instead pushing some into misery and homelessness. Flintshire in North Wales, just over 20 miles from Liverpool. There is work available here, but like elsewhere in Britain, older industries have shrunk or disappeared, leaving pockets of deprivation. If you're unemployed, too sick to work, or on a low income, then, like millions of people, you're probably on benefits. 18 months ago, Flintshire became one of the first places in the UK to roll out the new benefit system, universal credit. Around 3,500 people here are now on universal credit. We've been following their experiences to see how it's working. Flint Food Bank. Since last year, the number of people on benefits asking for their help has doubled.
Good morning. You all right?
One of them is single parent James McDade. He had to give up work to look after his 2-year-old son.
It's just me and the baby.
Do you mind me asking what your working situation is, why you're entitled?
I'm full-time dad. I come out to work to afford to do this.
James is claiming universal credit. He's entitled to roughly £1,000 a month. But that's not what he's getting.
So I only get £579 a month. My rent is £550 because I have to take.
And your rent's got to be paid out of that?
Yeah, this is all in one. You don't really have a lot to live on. It works out less than £30 a month. If there wasn't places like this, you'd be really in trouble, you know.
How are you managing?
You just struggle on, don't you?
There's been a mistake with his claim, and he's been left with almost nothing to live on. But he can't find out why.
Because I've questioned it.
So you're just waiting?
Yeah, it's one of them patient games, you have to wait. And it could take 3 months.
Got any transport?
No, we'll have to walk. It's not fair to have that much stress in your life when you've got everything else to worry about as well. It's just mayhem, isn't it? Because you just don't know if you're going to end up on the street or what.
See you again, mate.
Yeah, bye.
When universal credit was first proposed 8 years ago, it had widespread political support to ensure that work always paid more than claiming. It combines 6 benefits, including job seekers allowance, working and child tax credits, and crucially for our story, housing benefit. Under the old system, the government paid housing benefit directly to the council and many other landlords. But to mirror the world of work, universal credit is paid straight to the claimant in one monthly sum, which includes the amount for rent. It sounds simple, but does it work in practice?
Steady, steady.
Mechanic Anthony Smith lives in Connors Quay in Flintshire. He's worked all his life.
Well, I was working in Port Talbot. They asked me to come to Shotton in the steelworks, and I loved it. But the trailer's finished, so I was laid off. So then I went to QLS at Ellesmere Port.
But Anthony, who's 63, was laid off again last November. he hasn't been able to find another job.
There is work out there. I know there's work out there. It might be my age, I don't know. Come on, Bab.
He should be getting around £700 a month, which has to cover his rent as well. But he's struggled to cope with the new system.
This is a food that's come from the food bank. That'll last me 2 weeks.
He's getting a lot less universal credit than he should, so he's trying to raise some cash any way he can.
Yeah, that's what I'll sell. Is that there? Take him to the pawn shop over the road. That 32mm spanner from Snap-on would probably cost you £32. You'd be lucky to get £3 for it.
Universal credit is claimed online, and Anthony finds that hard. He's not the only one. Half of all claimants were unable to fill in the online application without help. Anthony has rented his council home for the last 2 years.
Nice to see you.
And you?
Can I come in?
It turns out that because he's short of money, he's not been paying his rent.
I can quite easily see me being evicted. I've even looked for somewhere to live, and I found a bridge where I can live.
So you can imagine being homeless?
Easily, yeah.
Why?
Because I owe rent.
You owe rent now?
Oh, yeah.
How much?
£4,000. Yeah, I know.
His universal credit has been reduced some months by up to £200, leaving him only £500 because he's been sanctioned or fined after he missed meetings at the job centre.
Are you playing ball? Are you doing what they want you to do?
The only thing I'm not playing ball with is I can't work the computer. So I've got to have somebody down there to help me. I don't know, I don't understand. The world's gone mad. We're left behind. I'm left behind.
Anthony's landlord is Flintshire Council.
I've extended that accommodation for a week.
We've been following its housing department since February. It's inundated with housing emergencies every day.
11 o'clock on Tuesday we've got this interview.
Many of them as a result of the problems with universal credit.
Are you still in a homeless situation now?
The biggest challenge for councils is people not paying their rent. In September, I met the council's head of housing.
We had a rent arrears position last year of 1.6 million. It's now £450,000 worse than it was then, and a large proportion of that is solely attributable to universal credit.
Did you think it would be that bad?
No. I didn't think I'd be sitting here having a conversation that says our rent arrears situation on our rent arrears positions £450,000 worse than it was last year.
In fact, Panorama has discovered that across the UK, council tenants on universal credit are falling behind with their rent, owing on average £663 compared to £263 for those still on housing benefit. That's more than double the debt. For Flintshire, the rise is dramatic, with average arrears in September for those on universal credit 6 times higher. But it's not just councils that aren't getting paid. Housing association tenants on universal credit are more than twice as likely to have rent arrears compared to other tenants.
Hi, I'm Katrin.
Hi, Richard.
Hi, Richard. Nice to meet you.
Here in Flint, Richard and Anita claim universal credit. Richard works at a local haulage firm on a low income. Anita's looking for a job. When Richard was off sick in January after a car accident, the family had to rely on benefits. And that's when their problems started.
Went down to the local Connect's office, told them what happened, waited, got a payment in December of £53, which was, we couldn't pay the...
That's all you got?
That's all we got. We couldn't pay council tax, which we owed. We couldn't pay rent.
Then, while he was off sick, Richard lost his job. The universal credit system showed Richard's severance pay as his monthly income, which meant they didn't qualify for help with their council tax.
They paid me week in hand plus any owed holiday pay. But the universal credit seemed to think was an ongoing payment, but it was just like my final payment, right, that's it.
This mistake in the system meant that with no savings to fall back on, they were in trouble.
Nobody would listen to us. The bills were just going up and up and up and up and up. We just couldn't get out of it.
Faced with a mountain of household bills, they prioritised paying the rent.
This is a notice to remind I have failed to make council tax payments on time.
Then they were taken to court for not paying their council tax.
I'd sell things around the house just to make money so I could put money back in the electric for that week.
In all, they had 8 months of stress and worry as the new benefits system got up and running. But could some problems with universal credit have been predicted and resolved earlier?
How was your journey?
Pretty good, thank you.
Professor Paul Hickman was commissioned by the government to study the impact of a key element of universal credit, direct payments. That means giving the tenants the rent money instead of the landlords. In his study, the majority of tenants on direct payments failed to pay their rent in full.
Did the government change things as a result of your study?
In some respects, it did, but in many respects, it continued in the path that it had in mind.
Do you feel like you were ignored?
Were we ignored? Extremely good question. Some of what we said was heard, but just the stress, I think they were committed to the course of rolling out universal credit. So in some senses, whatever we found, they were going to continue to plough ahead.
I'm off to meet someone whose story illustrates exactly what Professor Hickman was warning the government about. Keith Barber from Deeside has made a universal credit claim, which is taking weeks. While 56-year-old Keith waits, he's reliant on food banks. He owes more than £1,000 in rent, and he might lose his home.
Got a letter from the council saying a mention of eviction notices and all sorts of it's come with the letter. My biggest worry has always been homelessness.
Keith has mental health issues. Like some benefit claimants, he's vulnerable.
And why is it that you're not working?
I lost my last job because of depression. Too much time off because of it. It's a horrible thing. You can't be bothered doing anything, getting up in the morning for nothing.
He admits his life is chaotic. He just can't budget.
So one of the things about universal credit is that your rent's going to go to you now.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
There's a fair chance the council won't be getting it. I'm just terrible with money. I can't budget at all. Because they make you take the rent money yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't do that. Nightmare with money, mate.
This is what I've been trying to say to you. I've actually borrowed this phone off of somebody to phone you.
Anthony Smith is on the phone to the council about his rent arrears, all £4,000 worth.
If it's not enough, that's all I can do.
He's desperate to avoid eviction.
Yeah, I know I'm in trouble.
He's convinced that if the rent part of his universal credit had been paid direct to the council, he wouldn't be in this position.
You can have all of universal credit's money. Get them to give it you.
Anthony knows he's made things worse by missing appointments.
This is what I've been trying to say to you. They keep sanctioning me. Now, I've just explained to you.
He can't afford to miss his next one at the job centre. He arrives on time, but there's more confusion.
The woman I want to see is on holiday for a fortnight.
So what have they said to you now? You can't speak to them?
No, got to make another appointment tomorrow. But he said you'd be sanctioned again.
What would another sanction mean?
Another £200 off next month. Absolute waste of time.
Sorry.
I'm shaking with temper now.
Yeah.
Waste of time. I've had enough. Honest to God, I've had enough.
So Anthony's been sanctioned again. He's obviously really upset. And whoever's fault it is, the people who are going to pick up the bill are going to be the council.
If too much rent is owed, councils will evict tenants like Anthony. There were more than 5,800 evictions due to rent arrears from council homes in the UK last year. In Flintshire this month, evictions of council tenants are up by 55% compared to the same time last year.
How do you decide between evicting people and sucking up the extra rent arrears?
That's a really difficult one. There does come a point where you have to take a decision to evict. We do undertake a lot of intensive support around that before we get to that stage. But there is a degree of inevitability. Some people genuinely will not engage.
But what about those in privately rented homes?
Was that a flower?
These?
Yeah.
These are potatoes.
Are they?
Yeah.
Single dad James is getting less than he should, leaving him very little to live on.
You know, I've worked most of my life and I was in control then, and now all of a sudden I'm not in control of what's going on, am I? Bye. Bye.
But however desperate he gets, he makes sure he pays his rent on time to his private landlord. 61% of private landlords with tenants on universal credit have seen them go into arrears in the last year. In Flint, Steve White rents out much-needed rooms to single people on benefits.
12 bedsits in here as well.
Yes, at this present time.
But the way universal credit is paid could change that.
One is their insistence on paying what amounts to large sums of money to people who struggle with the responsibility of having large sums of money in their hands. And in many cases, it doesn't make its way to us.
And what's that meant for you?
Losses, significant losses, is difficult.
Have you had to evict people because of universal credit?
Unfortunately, yes.
That's creating a headache for the council. It's Marge Cooper's job to sign up private landlords to accept people on benefits.
Oh, smells freshly decorated and there's a carpet's been cleaned.
3 years ago, she had 346 landlords on the council's books. Now the number willing to rent to people on benefits has plummeted to just 50. Universal credit is often the deal breaker.
Will the tenant pay us direct, or will you be paying us direct?
Do you mean the rent?
The rent, yeah.
The rent will be the tenant's responsibility.
The council doesn't have enough accommodation to house all homeless families. Marge is under intense pressure to find a solution.
Welcome to third-party payments, part of the Department for Work and Pensions.
Good afternoon, it's Marge Cooper calling you from Flintshire County Council.
According to the government's Universal Credit website, they will consider paying rent directly to landlords, but only in certain crisis situations.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly.
So can Marge arrange that on someone's behalf?
The landlord themselves has to originate the request for alternative payment arrangement. It can't be done by a third party.
So she can't make it work. And the landlord says he's not having any joy either.
We can't talk to them. I've tried ringing them up. I've been on hold for hours, and in the end I've ended up putting the phone down. The losses on a single tenant can go into thousands. Times that by 10 or 20 tenants. It's something that has to change. We can't go on the way it is. The business can't go on the way it is.
Local authorities across the UK are concerned about the impact of rent being paid directly to their tenants instead of directly to them.
Hi, Catherine. Nice to meet you.
Welcome to Islington.
Thank you very much.
Basic reality for many families is if they are seeing big cuts to their income and they're faced
At the end of the month, with a choice between feeding their children and paying their rent, obviously they're going to feed their kids. So the landlord is always going to lose out in that. And I think part of the changes to the universal credit we need to try to make it work is that we go back to paying rent direct to landlords again.
Universal credit is administered by the Department for Work and Pensions, and I'm on my way to meet the minister responsible for that department. So our research for the BBC shows that rent arrears for those on universal credit are twice, across the UK, twice those on old benefits. Something's gone very wrong here, hasn't it?
After a period of time, people will on average see those arrears coming down. But the key point here is to make sure that people get support in terms of funding. And that is why early this year we introduced a package worth £1.5 billion, which means that anyone who's coming onto universal credit who's currently receiving housing benefit will get an extra 2 weeks of run-on, 2 weeks of extra money.
We've been speaking to councils, landlords, tenants. They say the direct payment system is a huge problem.
Well, I know one of the areas that you've been talking about is Flintshire, and in August this year, we've made sure that all social landlords are covered by the landlord portal.
They want those direct payments restored. Would you consider that?
Well, as I've said to you, we have a landlord portal, and it is entirely possible for that to happen currently. And by the end of this year...
But it's not working.
Well, with respect...
Otherwise, these rent arrears would not be so high if that was working fine.
As I've said to you, by the end of this year, we will have rolled out the landlord portal covering 90% of the whole of the social sector.
It's summer and the school holidays.
That's a nice shiny one, flat one. Thank you.
Anita and Richard are entertaining the kids as best they can.
They do understand that we haven't got a lot of money to go places, so this keeps them amused, happy.
They're still trying to get back on track after their problems with the universal credit system. They only resolved them with the help of their local MP. But they do have some good news.
I found a new job. Tomorrow will be the end of my second week. So hopefully first wage tomorrow.
Any change in income means a change in universal credit. Because it's paid monthly, they'll have to wait to see how much they'll get.
If Richard gets a good wage, then we don't get nothing, so we have to keep what money Richard's had throughout the week. But if it's not what I'm hoping, then I don't know, we'll just be panicking and panicking. Where are we going to hide these stones? By the trees? Enjoy that. We'll have to make more.
All right, James, do you want to come through with this way today? Yeah. Just follow me.
Today, James McDade has come to his local Citizens Advice Bureau for help in finding out why his universal credit payment is so low.
You did everything that they asked, but then for some reason on the 23rd of January, the system wanted you to report it as a change again. I know.
It's time to call the Universal Credit Helpline.
Sorry to keep you waiting. All our lines are busy at the moment.
After 40 minutes waiting, they finally get some answers.
You should get £2,177 in your bank account today or tomorrow. And then your next monthly...
How much? £2,500?
2,100.
After 6 months of living on food banks, it's a weight off his shoulders. But he's angry it's taken so long.
A bit ludicrous, isn't it, really? And I won't be the only person. There'll be hundreds and hundreds of people with a similar or different type of claim through universal credit.
Glad we sorted it, all right.
Okay, thank you now.
See ya. I'll come and get the door for you.
The government has announced extra investment to try to prevent these sorts of problems. The large-scale rollout has been delayed. But what about the issue of direct payments to tenants? Should the government think again?
I'm just not quite clear that as it currently stands in the model adopted in England and Wales that it will work.
Personally, would you scrap it?
I probably would actually I probably would scrap it, yeah.
Is it time to scrap universal credit? This is just one of a number of problems.
Well, the universal credit is working well. We've learnt in the process.
I don't think many people would agree with you that it's working well.
Well, I must say, we introduced £1.5 billion of support earlier this year. What we have is a system which is simpler, a system which people understand, and ultimately which makes sure they get into work faster, stay in work longer, and earn more.
There's a lot going on in your world at the moment. You've got an eviction order going on. You need to make sure that gets sorted first, OK?
In Flintshire this month, the gap in rent owed by those on housing benefit and universal credit has narrowed. But overall rent arrears continue to rise. The council say universal credit is just transferring costs from central government to them.
The burden shifted, but we're not getting any more money for that. And in fact, in the current situation and in relation to austerity, those whole impacts sort of create a perfect storm for us.
With more than 1,600 households on their waiting list, they're building new homes.
So we've got a high demand for these, haven't we?
Yes.
However, like other councils, rising rent arrears could jeopardise that.
We need to build a lot more new, genuinely affordable housing, particularly council housing, and that's harder if councils are getting less money into their housing accounts because rent arrears are higher. This will hit the number of new council homes being built across the country at a time when we desperately need more genuinely affordable housing.
Got myself a job.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Happy cleaning.
For many families, universal credit may have turned a corner and even helped them into work. But at what cost?
What do you think of universal credit?
It's just put us in poverty, put us in debt. Very, very stressful.
Although Keith's council has repeatedly tried to help him, he's still missed appointments with them and the job centre. He's just been told he's going to be evicted by the end of the month.
It's November. We've had the first frost, the first ices already. It's not going to end well, I don't think, this.
Anthony did manage to find some casual work, but it's too late.
Well, I've got the notice of eviction come. I've got to be out on the 20th. 11:30 on the 20th of this month. Where do you go? What do you do? The council won't give me another place. If I don't pay the rent, why should they? I'm absolutely worn out.
Flintshire has had a taste of the government's benefit reforms, but that's just the beginning. Over the next few years, thousands more families across the UK will start the move over to universal credit.